Mike Wazowski had been worried about his best friend for the past few weeks. Sully had been extremely busy with the big reopening of Monsters Inc., and there had been days where the big monster had been so stressed out he had forgotten which news stations he had been talking to. Therefore, there had been days where Sully had forgotten to lock the apartment after leaving home for work, and nights where Mike had found him sleeping in front of the TV. Therefore, he had been evenings where Sully had ordered pizza and forgot to pick it up. He had forgotten to call his mother for her birthday, but he had forgotten to call Mike's mother for her birthday. Being the CEO was obviously harder than it seemed, and Mike couldn't remember when the last time Sully had been looking that tired. Mike had to calm down when his best friend began to spend some time with Sophie Boggs. The green one never thought that he had been exactly what Sully needed. Someone special to spend time with in order to think about something else other than work for a while. Perhaps Sophie could be the one? She really seemed nice, and Mike had been encouraging Sully to spend more time with her, and hoping it would eventually lead to something more. But Sully had announced that he had gotten himself a side job a few weeks ago. Mike had been seriously began to question Sully's sanity, especially when he has heard about the kind of job it was. Sully was taking care of Randall Boggs, their former enemy and rival. The crazy lizard monster who had tried to kill him a month ago was now in Sully's keep, and Mike had troubles trying to allowing it to sink in. He had already knew Sully was extremely good-hearted and a sensitive monster, but he would never have guessed that he would spend almost every single minute of his free time trying to help Randall recover from his depression. Although Mike had been supportive towards his best friend, it just hadn't been without a worry. He had spent most of his sleepless nights thinking about what exactly was going on between Sully these days. But last Saturday, while hanging out with Sully and Randall, Mike had received an eye-opener or something that made everything perfectly clear to him. He couldn't believe that he had been so blind. Why hadn't he not noticed before? He had spent a big part in the day with the company of the two other monsters, and there were just something about it in Sully's eyes that had been on Randall's the entire time, or something like that by the way he looked at him. Something about the blue monster's sudden clumsiness around the purple one had something to do in a way. Sully always made sure Randall was alright, and something about that way Sully looked out as he was accidentally touched. Mike, before he knew what he had noticed, was possibly mistaken James P. Sullivan was falling for Randall Boggs. Mike was thrilled, or he wasn't a big fan of Randall, but it would take more than just a day to get over the years of not getting along. But he had decided that if the lizard turns out to be his best friend, special someone, then it's to be. And the only thing that mattered was Sully was happy, and Mike was sure to warm up Randall's dull eventually. Maybe. The green monster still didn't know whatever Sully had fully realized what was happening yet, but he certainly didn't seem to see so. Sunday, the blue monster had spent the entire day with Randall. As far as Mike knew, nothing more had happened between them. Apparently they had been out on a walk, spending more of the rest of the day with Gladys Lorenzo and some card games. Mike had knew Sully couldn't be a little bit more slow for his own good sometimes, and it didn't surprise him, not at all. He didn't seem to know what was going on, but Mike knew he had more than willing to do his best friend a solid push right in the direction if he had to. It was Thursday afternoon, and Sully sat down in one of the corners of Randall's couch, looking at the TV show through drowsy eyes. Randall placed one of the hands on the other couch with the teacup on the pillow, and his two sets of feet were hidden underneath the blanket, and his eyes glanced at the TV through the black-framed glass. The lizard had already started to wear his glasses for the presence of Sullivan earlier that week, and when Sully looked over at him now, it became clear to him that he had won the purple one's trust after all. Randall would never allow Sully to see him like this if he didn't consider him as a friend. By now, the two monsters were both tired from one of the other walks around the streets of Monstropolis, and they were both so comfortably full from Sully's dinner. 2 boxes of microwave lasagnas that he had miraculously managed to run. Randall had experienced some serious problems with believing in his 2 eyes. Sully had took a glance at Randall at the other end of the couch every once in a while, mainly because he didn't know what to think. He just spent it almost every morning and afternoon, both that week and the previous night with the lizard. And they were both getting along hardly without any problems now. They were able to talk without almost about anything, and Randall would seem glad to have everything for the blue one over. Sully enjoyed Randall's company as well. In fact, he enjoyed it a bit more than he expected it. He actually found himself thinking the purple monster at work. Every time they accidentally came into each other's heart skips a beating. When he looked at him, he wanted him to smile. But Sully wasn't really stupid. He had been in love before. He had recognized the feelings he was expressing at the moment. Besides Mike's implications, when he had dropped him off on the outside of Randall's apartment every morning, he couldn't be more obvious. The green monster would always wish him luck on trying to get him with a blink. Well, that's when he realized and wanted to start humming a love song, as Sully got out from his car and closed the door behind him as quick as possible. But still though, despite of all the signs and feelings and implications of the furry monster felt unsure, he just didn't know if he understood. He never been in, well, could he possibly be? He even had a hard time just thinking about it. Crushing on a guy? As if the situation wasn't even tricky enough at the moment, there was still yet another thing that troubled Sully and Randall. He didn't even know how Randall felt, and even been less so that he would react a new way if he knew how Sully felt about him. The two had grown close now, and just because of that, but it was nothing less than a miracle that had been managed to become friends in the first place. And Sully was afraid that he'd scare Randall away if he brought the subject up. Love and romance happened to be around among the few these things that he didn't talk about. However, Sully realized that he might have to bring it up to Randall if he was to ever know how the scaly monster felt. Randall? The lizard turned his head towards Sullivan. He had noticed a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah, you okay? The purple monster's eyes narrowed even more behind the glasses. Sullivan seemed nervous. Sure, it's just, well, I was wondering. Sully didn't know where to put his hands. It's just, he had tried to find a hard time finding out the right words, but when he saw the look on Randall seeing him, it was eventually he sat straight up and got himself together. Have you ever had a girlfriend? Randall's eyes widened a little. He hadn't answered that unexpected question straight away. Eventually shook his head and glanced at the other, not knowing where he was going with this. No. Once the little word escaped from his lips, Randall had realized that this was his first time he had told Sullivan or heard anyone that he'd never been in a relationship. He quickly asked Sullivan a question in return, attempt to, well, echo the silence of his own statement. He could possibly feeling the hanging in the air. How about you? Girlfriend? Or you're just happy with Lazowski? He just added his last sentence to make himself feel a little better, but he didn't help much. He took another sip of his tea. Well, I've been in a couple of the relationships, but nothing serious, the blue one admitted. And I haven't been seeing anyone for a few years now. Okay. The awkward pause followed. It wasn't the first time the silence had ruled between Sully and Randall after they first became friends, but this was by far one of the longest and weirdest ones yet. Do you want to come back to work? Sully's sudden change of subject came as pleasant as surprise on Randall. He let out a breath and was thankful for not having to give away the humiliating details about his non-existing love life. Work? Yeah, Sully seemed happy about the subject, at least to his facial expression, and had some time to go back to normal. Everyone else got their jobs back when I took over the company, and you can have yours too, if you want it. But I'm a scarer. Randall didn't understand. What am I supposed to do there? I think you could pull it off, laugh collecting. The lizard had a moment to think. He didn't really have been thinking about getting his job back. In fact, he had been too depressed that he didn't even think about working at all. But now that he knows that he was starting to feel a bit better and gave him a little closer thought, he realized that eventually he could need something else than just hanging out with Sullivan and Gladys in the apartment. I don't know. Maybe. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm ready yet. I didn't mean right away. You just need to fully recover first. But whenever you're feeling ready, all you'll have to do is tell me, and I'll rehire you. I'll think about it. Randall took another long pause. He wasn't so sure if he wanted to spend his days trying to make a human child laugh, and he wondered what it would be like to return to Monsters, Inc. After what happened there, his face reflected in fear and just the thought of it. Sully understood what was on his mind. Don't worry about the others. I'll explain to them. I still need time to think about it. No problem. Have you told Sophie yet? Sully shook his head. He hadn't told Sophie that her brother was back, but instead, he had to do it very soon. She invited him over for dinner again tomorrow, and he had planned to tell her then. However, Sully hadn't told Randall that he was eating dinner with his sister. He feared that it would just lead to jealousy and misconceptions. I haven't found the right occasion yet, but I'm going to tell her. Don't worry. Good. Randall seemed satisfied with the answer. Sully looked over at him again and felt a strike of sadness as he remembered that he couldn't be able to see him tomorrow due to his date with Sophie. Do you think you'll be okay spending the tomorrow with Gladys, Randall? You're not coming over? Sully was pleased to hear the disappointment in Randall's voice and hurried to explain. In fact, I can't come over tomorrow. I have an early meeting at work, and in the evening I'm going to visit my parents. Okay, are you coming over for Saturday? Randall sat up and glanced at the blue monster. His emerald eyes were twice the normal size, and then he had his glasses on. Sully felt that he could stare at them for hours. The color was incredible. If you want me to. I think that would be nice. The lizard could feel his face turn hot. He had looked down at his own feet. Inviting someone over for him was difficult. Are you coming over? Do you want me to? Yeah, fine, I'll come. For dinner? Sure, I can come for dinner. Only if you let me make it. You're a terrible cook. Sully didn't exactly knew what was happening. Randall had just invited him over for dinner. The blue monster was so excited over the suggestion that he commented on his own cooking. It didn't even insult him. He even accepted an ear-to-ear smile. Great! Randall looked at him for a moment while. The four suddenly arose from the couch and headed towards the kitchen. He came back straight away, writing something down on a piece of paper. What's that? Sully asked, stared startled by the invitation, and didn't know what else to say, and he jumped to his seat at the tip of Randall's tail brushed against his leg when the purple monster slithered back to its own part of the couch. A shopping list. As if I'm going to make dinner, I want fresh ingredients, not that microwave crap of yours. Randolph finished the list and handed it over to Sully. You think you could pick these up on your way over here on Saturday? I'll prepare the food in front of you. Perhaps you'll pick up a trick or two. Heaven even knows you need it. The furry one nodded as he chuckled. The Randall he knew was on his way back, though, although it seemed to be a big improvement. Sully knew that there was something more to him now. He took a hold of the list as he did, and had his hand touch Randall's. It caused him to both to withdraw straight away after avoiding each other's eyes. Mike was waiting for Sully in their apartment when the blue monster made it back later that evening. How did it go? The green one smiled, and he followed his best friend into the living room. As they sat down on their chairs, it went well. He's doing much better. Yeah, but how did it go? Did you tell him? Tell him what? You know. Sully's expression made it other than clear to Mike that he didn't know, and that the little he let out a deep sigh. Sully, did you tell him about how you feel about him? The furry monster, all he could do for himself was to blush from the tip of his tail and all the way up to the top of his horns. He wasn't really keen on discussing his feelings about Randall with Mike, as if he wasn't 100% sure about himself yet. No, I didn't tell him anything. He rose from his chair. Is there any food here? I'm starving. Want to order something? I can. So. Mike raised his hand, tried to shut him up, and just be more compassionate face. It's okay. It's all brand now. I understand. I know. I just don't know what's happening, Mike. Sully sat down again and placed his hands on his lap, his eyes focusing on something that appeared miles away. I know. The pause that just followed was as awkward as a long time in Randall's apartment earlier that evening. Sully and Mike were normally able to talk about everything. His subject was difficult for them both. Eventually, Mike was the one to break the silence, as usual. When are you going to see him again? Saturday. I'm having dinner with Sophie and Rex tomorrow, remember? Have you told him about that? No. I thought it could lead to misconceptions. You don't want him to believe that you're having something to do going on with his sister. Something like that. But I'm seeing Randall again on Saturday. He wanted me to come over as he's going to make dinner, and he's making dinner? Mike's eye even grew wider with excitement. Sully, that's like a date. Sully was about to say something, but Mike beat him to it. And it's actually a little perverted, Sul. Like you're having a date with Randall on Saturday and a date on his sister on Friday? The dinner with Sophie is not a date. I told you that like a million times. But the one with Randall is, huh? Mike smirked at Sully, whose answer was to blush again and look away. But the green monster was pleased to see that shy smile was present on his face.